Well, happy Memorial Day, everyone.
Happy Memorial Day.
So today we remember all those who sacrificed their life for the sake of freedom, or another way to be more particular, for the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that implies, as one nation, and that is what our veterans who died for us, we are one nation under God. That implies that we are one, but yet are we all the same?
No.
Is Joe the same as Theron?
Could be.
Are Swedenborgians the same as Catholics? No. Is the United States the same as Russia? No. Am I the same as my mom? Is Charlie the same as Nancy? No. Are Alan and Mary the same? No. Tom and Jenny? No. But we are one in this church. We're one spiritual family. And we're all part of one nation. And what's amazing is that this weekend, I had the privilege of leading a session with our teens up at the Almont Memorial Day Teen Retreat. And I asked them where they got their theme. I thought for sure one of the teens came up with the theme, but no, alas, it was Reverend Jen Toffel. But the theme was unity within diversity. Interesting, wasn't it? So we started out, and I'm going to do the same thing with you, and I think it's going to be interesting what you come up with. And I'll see if there's things that what you come up with are the same as what our teenagers came up with. Here's the question. Now we're talking about what are things in this world or in creation that are diverse. I'll give you the first answer, and then I'm going to ask you to speak. The first answer that came up from our teens was faces. Have you ever seen, even among identical twins, have you ever seen two exactly the same faces? No. What else is there not the same of in this world? What else is diverse in this world?
Snowflakes.
Fingerprints.
Snowflakes.
Snowflakes.
Personalities.
Personalities, good. One teenager yesterday said slime molds. I don't even know what a slime mold is. I know what a mold is, but I don't know what a slime mold. You should have heard their answers. They were great. They're so smart, these teenagers. They're just going so far. I just love them. So they came up with slime molds. What else is different? Who said, what did you say, Mary?
Personalities.
Personalities. Let's go in that direction. There are no two exactly the same spiritual journeys. There are no two exactly the same theologies of life. There are no two same days. Days. Have you ever had the exact same day happen twice? Isn't that interesting?
Bill Murray did.
There are no two the same clouds. Interesting. What else in nature is there not the same of?
Birds.
Birds.
Zebra prints.
Ooh, that didn't come up. I wish I had you yesterday. Zebra prints. That would have been great. We spent a half an hour, and that's a long time for a session. We spent a half an hour with a bunch of teens thinking of all the things that are different. Anything else that you can think of? There are no two same rivers. The river doesn't flow the same way twice. Even if it's in the same place, in the same 2 days, it doesn't flow the same. What about your brain? First of all, there's no two brains that are the same, but inside...
Not even the same day, right?
Not even the same day. There are not... That's right. Anything else?
There's no two, everybody responds to medical treatment differently.
Yes. So even if you give the same medical protocol to 2 or 4 or 10 different people, they all respond differently to the same medicine and dosage. Interesting, isn't it? So what is the conclusion here? One of the teens, it was actually Scout Steinheiser from LaPorte, Indiana. Scout said, well, everything diversifies. Everything changes and diversifies and becomes different or more complex. Evolutionary process continues on. The creative life process doesn't ever stop. So remember the theme is there's oneness or unity inside of that which is diverse and branching off.
They bothering you?
That's interesting, isn't it? So let me ask you another question, which I also asked our teenagers, which they loved. Why is there so much diversity?
Because everybody's an individual, or everything.
And why?
Because
Creator
we
made it.
wanted it that way.
Who did?
We
God did.
Bingo.
What was that?
God did.
Well, you know.
You guys are great. You would have loved this retreat. You would have loved this teen retreat. So, going back to Emanuel Swedenborg's theology, just for a minute, I invite you to consider his answer as to why. Because remember, in the scriptures, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one God. We start out with oneness. And out of oneness comes all this creative diversity. Why? Well, Swedenborg suggests, and it's for you to think about on this Memorial Day weekend, and why we protect the freedom to be different. We're all one as a nation. We're all one as human beings, as a species. But we're all so different. And our country celebrates the difference. Our country gives us freedom to be who we are. Can you imagine having to be like anybody else? You'd be inside there going, no, I want to be me. And sometimes with cults and with certain ideologies, we are suppressed to be a cookie cutter, to be too much like other people. But this country, what we're protecting is the right life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, to be who we are, to celebrate who we are. And here we have this one God. Why wasn't God content just to kind of exist as one God? What could you imagine? Why would God just not want to just sit there and be?
He was bored.
Well, that's kind of a roundabout answer. Joe said because God was bored. But he's not completely off. He's not totally off. It's not the real depth of the answer, but that's a part of it. God, if your premise, if your presupposition is that God is one and God is love, the very nature of love is not to be content within itself and to just enjoy the blessed state. What does love want to do?
Spread.
Bingo. Love wants to reach outside of itself and render something other than itself blessed. I know this is deep, but this is what we're protecting. Love, which is God, wants to render something other than itself blessed. So God creates the other, which is
Socializing.
us. God creates the other so that the other might be blessed as well. And so that is the reason why we have other. And that creative force never stops. And so what we can come to from that love must love other than self, something, someone different than self. And that the more difference and uniqueness there is, this is Swedenborg now, the more beautiful and perfect heaven is and this world. Amen. So we're not here to make each other like each other. Do you ever feel the pressure among peers to be like other people?
Yes.
But that's the small self. The big self, which is God in us, wants us to celebrate and stand forth and be who we are. Heaven is perfected as more and more join in that blessed state. That we don't want a heaven of just similar people or similar life. God wants us to express what is different and unique. There's no one just like Janine. Thank God.
Yeah.
And there's no one like Andrew. There's no one like Barb. There's no one like Bree and Brian and Alan and Jenny and Tom and me. There's no one just like us. And to have a way of thinking in life that we're to celebrate these differences is so important. I'd like to read from Swedenborg's writing directly, just very briefly, from Divine Providence, paragraph 4.4, which says, and it requires an elevated mind to understand this. So you ready? You got your elevated mind cap on? Divine Providence 4.4 says, a form makes one the more perfectly as the elements entering into it are distinctly different, yet united. So what's beautiful, we are more perfect the more different and unique and individual we are in this church. And that's why I love this church. Because we can disagree, we can agree, we can discuss, we can evolve and change, we can be who we are, and celebrate that even though we're one church, we have many parts. Even though your body, as the Apostle Paul said, there's one body but different parts, and all parts contribute to the whole. So Swedenborg says, you would think, if we're thinking with our lower natural brain, you would think that a form of one would be more perfect if all the parts were the same. But that is not heaven's way. Heaven's way is to celebrate and stand forth with your unique self. And that's a beautiful thing. So Swedenborg would suggest that every time we have a thought that somebody's different, and we actually experience love, that's heaven, that's the Lord in us. But we have another way to respond, which happens often in high school. And I don't know if you kids would agree. But that tendency to want to form it with peer pressure to be like other people in school. The other response, love is activated when we see somebody different. But the other response is fear, isn't it? And that's when we actually want people to be like us. So catch yourselves on this Memorial Day weekend. Catch your mind wanting people to be like you, or you wanting people to be like someone else. Because anytime we're doing that, that's a fear response. But the love response is activated when we can see somebody who's really different. You ever notice somebody with a quirk? You know, when we're really challenged, are people who oftentimes who have autism, a different spectrum of autism, or people who have mental illness, and we don't know how to respond to that difference. And so instead of judging it because it's different or that person expresses themselves differently, but rather just say there's another expression of heaven. And that heaven is more perfect when we can be who we really are, with our perfection and imperfections. We don't have to judge. Alan, did you?
It's growth.
Ah.
Well, when with disease, you have a growth in you, but then maybe that's resistance, you know.
Yes, yeah. And we get stuck in our freedoms. Remember, we're enjoying the freedom that we have to be who we are. We're enjoying the freedoms that this nation gives us.
Virginia, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been outside this country. I've been in third world countries. Like, this is nothing. This is amazing. This is America is the most beautiful place on earth.
Ah.
There's nothing like this, right?
Yeah, and thank you. Think about, even in your own life in this country, times when you didn't feel free. and think about how all we have to do is tap into God's love, which is freedom itself. And we are free. I mean, we know this from the Holocaust survivors. People who said, you can take my body, but you can't take my mind. That's the Lord. So on this Memorial Day Sunday, we give thanks for those who gave us the freedom and sacrificed their own physical lives and their families' happiness so that we have the freedom to be who we are. And to remember that though we are all so different, and it is an incredible blessing to be free, that we are all one in God.